Hello, everyone. Alrighty, so we're gonna start getting going. Can we hear me? There we go. Can y'all hear me? Awesome. Okay, so welcome to Anderson Ranch in our summer faculty lecture series. So, my name is Lane Preston. I am the studio coordinator for furniture and wood. And so, before we begin, please take a moment and silence your cell phones. We don't want any of those going off while we are going. Excellent. So, I would like to start by recognizing that Anderson Ranch campus resides on the historic tribal lands of the Ute people, who called this area home for over 800 years. In honor of this legacy, we focus on building an inclusive community here, maintaining that this is a place for inspiration, creativity, in the center of the Rocky Mountains. So, first up, I'd like to introduce Dan Brocket. So, Dan Brocket creates hand-woven baskets from willow grown on his 12-acre property, Foggy Blossom Farm in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. As a grower turned self-taught artist, there's an element of companionship with and reverence for his material that permeates every project. So, please help me welcome Dan.
Oop. Thank you. How's that? Pretty good? Cool. My name is Dan Brocket. I am a basket maker, a willow grower, and a craft educator. I own and operate Foggy Blossom Farm outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with my wife, who is here helping with our class this week. We met. Yay, Betsy. Without her, I wouldn't be here, so thank you. We met in 2010, and we connected on a lot of things, but one of the big things was farm dreams. We don't come from a farming background, but it was just something that we connected on. In 2014 and 2016, Betsy went through cancer treatments, and in 2017, when she was going through all of this recovery and we were finally starting to get our heads above water, we really went back to that initial farm dream, and we thought we have to just buckle down and we have to figure this out. We have to figure out what our life is going to look like going forward after treatments. And that's what it looked like initially. This is from the bottom side of our farm. It's 12 acres. I don't know if you saw that on there. We went there, and this is the very first time that we saw the property, and it was this blank slate. And we were able to look at it and think, we could make this our own. We could put our farm dream on there. We didn't know what that was quite yet, but we knew that we were so lucky to get this and that we would have the opportunity to do that. So in 2018, we established Foggy Blossom Farm as a business, and we started out thinking we were going to do cut flowers and market gardening. And then I turned 40 and had a bit of a crisis. As you can see, I look insane in this picture. So this is right around my birthday, which is June 14th, and it was a real turning point. I'm being treated for Lyme here, and that put me down for about 6 months after this picture was taken. It really, really hit me hard. And it really made me think a lot about what Betsy had gone through because, seeing her go through all of these treatments and the recovery and how difficult that was, and what I thought that I was probably going to go through, it really got me thinking about, I'm 40, how am I going to have a farm? I have a full-time job. Am I really going to be able to start an annual farming operation and start from scratch every single year and do all of the work myself? So after I got home and we really started to think about that more, I was doing research. What could I do? What could we do to have this farm life that was sustainable for just me with a full-time job? So we found perennials. We saw people doing really wonderful things with perennials, and I was like, that's what we could do. We could plant it now, figure it out later. And also at that time, I was really trying to figure out what I could do in the winters. It's cold and it's dark in Pittsburgh, and I had all the other 3 seasons figured out. What could I do in the winter? So during my research, I found a video of someone weaving a willow casket out of willow. And not only was he weaving the baskets, but he was growing all of the willow and processing it himself. And I thought, wow, this is something I could do. I could do it in the winters, and I also could connect this art practice with agriculture. And it was a really fascinating discovery. It was a really beautiful, just a chance moment, and I knew this is what we should be doing. So in 2019, I continued exploring this craft, and this is me in our kitchen because we don't have a lot of infrastructure on the property, so I was just doing it wherever we could. And this is not willow, and the previous baskets were not willow either. They were just whatever we could find. I really wanted to make sure that I liked this craft before I dove into it and started to figure it out. So these are blackberry canes that I knocked all of the thorns off of so that I could just get my hands on it and see if making a basket form was something I liked. I really loved it, so I decided let's do the whole thing. Let's grow our own willow. One of the other reasons that I wanted to grow our willow is because not many people grow it and sell it for basket makers. So there's this limited supply, and I thought, well, we better get started now because it takes a long time to get really great material from your willow plantings. So this is the very first planting. And there's my very first harvest, which is pretty meager. I could put it on my shoulder, but I was fascinated, and I was able to make my very first basket. I couldn't wait to do it properly and dry it down and rehydrate it and do all the things that you're supposed to do when you make a basket. So I wove it fresh just to, again, figure out, is this something I want to do? And I loved it. I was hooked. Something clicked, and I was like, yes, we found it. We've got it. So in 2020, I had a bit of time on my hands. And I decided to put myself through this self-guided apprenticeship through books and videos. And here I am again in the kitchen, on the floor, working in not a great environment. But it's my first time soaking material. You can see I have this tarp in the background. I have all my tools that I ordered, and I'm really giving it a go. And then I ran out of material. So now what do you do? So luckily, it was at a good time of year where I was able to reach out to a willow grower. He had material, and I bought this big old box of it. So then it came, and I had to figure out, what am I going to do with it? I was soaking in a tube because I was just soaking really small amounts, and now I had to figure out how to really soak larger material, or larger quantities. So I started with this little pond, and then I dug this trough on the right and lined it with rubber, and that worked pretty good for the beginning. Making in isolation. So it was still 2020, and it was a very difficult year for everyone, obviously, but it really gave me the time to put into this craft, to continue to figure out if I liked it, but also to make without a teacher. I know it sounds insane that I am a basket teacher, but I am terrified by teachers. Them looking over my shoulders, I really always felt less than, and it made me really nervous, but this was a way for me to make mistakes and not have somebody say, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. Not that teachers do that, but that's how I feel teachers are. So it really gave me this opportunity to just dive in and make mistakes. And because we had pivoted our farming dreams, we had already started Foggy Blossom Farm, obviously. So we were sharing what we were doing. People were seeing what we were making. They were seeing we were growing willow and making baskets, and they were fascinated. So somebody said, do you want to come and do this market? I had really wanted this to be a fun thing. I thought, I'm just going to do this for fun. I'm not going to try to sell stuff and blow this up like every other craft thing that I tried to do in the past. But here I am. I thought, well, I've been doing it long enough, and people were interested, and they asked us to do this, so I might as well go and see what it's like to try to sell baskets to people. It was a very vulnerable moment. I'm probably happy that I had that mask on because it felt like I was, in Halloween or something like that, and I was a different person. It didn't go great. We didn't sell many baskets, but it was a really great opportunity for me to see what it would be like to try to be a basket maker that sells baskets. And I really focus on functional basketry. And then I got home from that, and even though it didn't go great, I was still really, really excited, and I wanted to keep going, and I thought, I cannot kneel on the kitchen floor again and make a basket. So I have limited skills with construction, but I figured it out, and I made this little tiny studio, and that's my pandemic beard. It got way creepier and worse than that. But there I am, my first winter, and I'm in the studio. It's tiny, but it works for me. I'm able to make it work for the most of the projects that I do. And I was really exploring a lot of different styles of willow basketry. There are a few major styles, and I was just like, ooh, I want to try a little bit of everything. 21, I'm like, yes, this is really great. I found the thing. I'm going to keep going. So every year prior, we were expanding our willow, and here I am doing the same thing at the beginning of the year. So this is early in the year. This is probably March. And then I had another crisis. My first crisis of craft with willow. And all of the reasons that I got into willow that I disregarded and I started to make it into a business, I started to question myself. Why did I do this again? I started to feel like an imposter, like I was moving too quick, that I shouldn't be showing anyone any of this work because if I was really, really critical, it wasn't that great. But it was what it was, and I got to the point where it became such a problem that I decided I'm going to go out and I'm going to kill all the willow. And if anyone knows anything about willow, if you had been with me at that moment when I said that, you would have said, that's not going to work, you're crazy. And it didn't work, and I'm really thankful that it didn't. It was a really low point. I just thought, I want to get rid of this. I'm going to start clean. I'm going to find something else. I'm going to move on with my life. It came back, and I decided, you know what? I have to honor my side of this bargain or this relationship because I planted it. It didn't decide to go there. I put it there. So I had to get back into it. I had to come to some sort of an acceptance with this craft that I was fairly good at it, that I really enjoyed it, and that I just needed to get over myself and move on with it. So I did. I had the studio, and I finally figured out soaking. I moved the soaking tank indoors, which was really helpful. And then I had been buying material, so I knew the quality of the material that I was processing was not up to snuff. I was like, that does not look like that. I need to make mine look like theirs. So I really started to hone in my craft of harvesting and processing the material. Because I had a really difficult year, I didn't make many baskets, so here's just a little sample of what I made that year. 2022, I'm back in it. I'm 100% ready to do this. I'm getting serious. Here I am working in the studio, and you can see a bunch of baskets hanging there. I'm fully committed. I'm ready to do this thing. And I expanded quite a bit more. Most people, when they see how much willow we have, are like, is this for you? And it does seem crazy, but it takes about 5 years for a plant to produce really great material. So it takes a lot of it. And then if you have a bad growing year, you lose a lot. So this is all for me at this particular moment. And then we decided that we just had to keep going, and we were seeking out other opportunities. And this is our very first Foggy Blossom Farm official event, and it was this emerging artist market. It went really great. I really enjoyed it, and it really kept us on the path. I decided to take my first in-person class. These are some of the baskets that I made in that class. And the teacher said, what you have done up to this point is valuable, and you should keep going. And that was the most important part of that whole class, that she said, you did the work, you're really good at this, please keep going. So I did. I got home from that experience, and I applied for this regional residency at a place in Pittsburgh, where I would go in once a week. That was part of my obligation, was just to go in once a week and make. So I did. I came in every week, and I made a basket. Also, I had other opportunities to work with the public through some of the events there, and this is my first experience teaching strangers about willow and how to do some simple basket projects. I made a lot more baskets that year. One of the other things in my residency program, I was really focused on honing in my craft. As opposed to making a lot of baskets, I was making baskets and really being intentional. 2023 became our year of, well, I shouldn't say our, I should say it became my year of yes, and Betsy's problem to figure out how to make that work. Sorry about that. So every opportunity that it came across, I was like, yep, we can do that. And I have no idea how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. This is a basket that I made for Contemporary Craft for their annual gala to raise some money. It was also when I started to really hone in how to juggle. I have a full-time job. I still have that job. I'm not a full-time basket maker. So I was really figuring out how to hone that in, how to juggle all of these things in my life and survive it. I had to teach my first class. That was part of my responsibility at Contemporary Craft for my residency, and I was terrified. It didn't go as I had planned, but it taught me so much about every single class afterwards, and I met some really wonderful people and had a really great time, and really learned that I liked teaching and I wanted to try to do it more. I also had to give my very first public talking engagement, and that was, thank you. That was terrifying. It was the most frightening thing that I've ever done. I'm pretty panicked right now, if you can't tell. But it went so great. I thought, people were really interested, and it felt like an important story to tell. After it was over, I was like, we got to keep doing this. After my residency was over, I was like, okay, what do I do now? Because I don't have this obligation to come in every week and this responsibility to make. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to start doing bigger and more complicated things because I had worked on my craft. So here's some really complicated forms that I had wanted to make for years, and I was finally able to do it. And then I did my biggest thing to date, and it really takes it all back in two ways. I'm back inside the house making, which is unfortunate, but I couldn't use my tiny little shed to make this giant casket. And it also connects me back with where I first found willow basketry, seeing that casket. It was the most complicated thing I had done to date. It took me 40 hours to make this base, but it really did so many things. It was really cathartic for me because I have this serious fear of death that started way, way, way back when I was young. So when I first saw the casket, it was a little bit jarring. Talking about death is a little bit taboo in our culture, and this was really a great way for me to connect the way that Willow goes through all of these cycles of life and death, and how I am going through these cycles of life and eventual death. It was really therapeutic for me to make this basket, or this casket basket. After that, I thought, I'm feeling pretty good. I think I'm good at this. I'm going to apply for the American Craft Council Emerging Artist Cohort, and my picture's on there, so I actually was accepted. And then this was another real low point. It should have been high, and it was for a little bit until I started, and then I was like, I don't belong here. Look at these people. They're amazing. What am I doing here? I struggled a lot, but it was a really great program, and they really helped me get through that. And I'm so thankful that I didn't give up or didn't give in and didn't just throw in the towel. I'm still utilizing the opportunities through the American Craft Council, and it's just been really, really helpful after I got over myself again. Through Contemporary Craft, I've continued to have opportunities, and this was one of them. They connected me with an artist that was going to come in and do a national residency program, and at the end of her residency, she was going to have a show where it showcased work that she collaborated on with artists here in Pittsburgh that really spoke to her time here and her research in the area. So here we are blowing glass into some of the forms that I made for the collaboration. And that wonderful artist was Adrienne Siegel. Thank you, Adrienne. You're the best. She was amazing. This was the first time I ever collaborated with anyone, the first time anyone had seen my work in a gallery setting. And Julian, the amazing glass blower, really brought all that together and made these beautiful pieces. And I made some work. And I made some more work. So this was my most prolific year to date, or at that time. 2024, going places literally. We're here in Colorado. and figuratively. So this is me in our most recent planting, harvesting in the dormant season. This is all 1 year's worth of growth, if you can imagine that. Some of our plants grow 20 feet in 1 year. And then we had this really great opportunity to bring students for a future class to the farm to see what it's actually like to do everything before you sit down and make a basket. Because almost nobody has that opportunity that takes a class in willow basketry. Usually you just show up, you sit down, and you're like, oh, I'm using this material, cool. So this was great for them to come, and they really got to see how difficult it is. 90% of basketry comes before you make the basket. 10% is sitting down and actually making. These are those wonderful people. We had a really, really great time. They made beautiful things, and they learned so much because we did it over 8 weeks, and they got to do it over and over and over again to really learn the craft. Then we took it on the road and did our first out-of-state class at Sanborn Mills Farm, and everyone went home with the thing, which was great. We loved that. Beautiful people, beautiful experience. And then connecting it all back together again, back to the very beginning where I found willow basketry and my very first experience as an artist at Contemporary Craft. I applied for this Hereafter exhibit. I was accepted, and I was able to show my piece in the gallery, and it was my first solo piece in a show. And just to connect those two things, you know, where Contemporary Craft was so kind to me and where my whole experience started. And we filled in the canvas. So I wish we had a drone shot of this, and we've been talking about that for years, but it is a very different experience now. Willow found me at the perfect time, and it has been my guiding light through the murky waters of midlife. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dan. So after this, let's please introduce our next speaker, who's going to be Andrew Moore. Andrew Moore is a widely, sorry. I also am not a big fan of public speaking, so. Andrew Moore is a widely acclaimed photographer for his photographic series, usually taken over many years, which record the effect of time on the natural and built landscape. His publications include Blue Alabama, Dirt Meridian, Cuba, Detroit Disassembled, Governor's Island, Russia, and Inside Havana. So please help me welcome Andrew.
I am so moved by Dan's story. That's kind of blowing me away. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you to the Anderson Ranch for having me here. I'm a little nervous. I don't know why, but I'm very grateful for all the people I've met here and for the invitation to teach this class. My pictures are about time and about telling stories about time and the effect of time through images. So I'm going to just start with a picture. And this is a scene in an island called Bornholm, which is owned by Denmark, but it's actually off the coast of Sweden. And what you're looking at in the foreground are the ruins of a Viking castle from the 13th century. And in the background, you see some sheep grazing, and then in the very distance, you see the tip of a lighthouse. Now, this picture is made around midnight. It's in June, so it's the midnight sun. The sun is just beginning to set, and the fog is rolling back into the Baltic Sea. So I had scouted this location the day before, so I knew kind of what the positions were going to be, but the fog was great. And so I had the camera set up, and I heard something, and so I just opened the shutter, and I left the shutter open for maybe a minute or so. And I think there's a laser pointer here. So this trail, these people who were kind of doing this ruin tour walked through the whole frame and just crossed through. And then they came and they stood at the edge of this foggy embankment looking out into this sea. And you can actually see here, there's even some a couple people didn't quite make it to they sat on the bench. And this is very reminiscent of a German painting by Caspar David Friedrich called a man in a green suit looking out over a sea of fog. So this picture is called Sea of Fog, and it's a kind of homage to Caspar David Friedrich's famous romantic painting. And so this kind of layering is always been something that's been interesting to me. But this picture, I actually didn't see it until several weeks later when I developed the negative. So I had no idea what had happened, but just kind of being present and being open to the kind of serendipity and chance of the moment. And that's really what I'm after as a photographer, to be present, to be aware, and to kind of let things happen spontaneously. Now, I lived in New York City for many years, and I photographed New York. This picture dates back to 1982, so more than 40 years ago. I was living downtown on the South Street Seaport, and one of the kinds of conditions I always like to photograph at the place are places in transition. So at this time, the Fulton Fish Market was slowly being migrated up into the Bronx, but there were still remnants of the fish market there. So you can see the signs, and it's a kind of atmosphere of New York that no longer exists. But it has this kind of folding of space, and it's always something that I'm interested to do, draw the viewers deeply into the photograph. This is an image called Peck Slip. So the width of the street, so you have to imagine that before this was paved over, ships would have been pulled in sideways to unload. And what you're seeing here are wholesalers who have come early in the morning to buy fish for the restaurants and so forth. But in the backdrop, you can see these are early 19th century row houses, and then you have some of the financial district, even the World Trade Center towers. And so all of this is kind of combined together into this cityscape, and this layering of time, these it's almost like a cross-section, is what I've always been most interested in. Now, at this point so this would be in the mid-'80s, I'd been photographing the city and shooting 8x10 film, but it was a very frustrating process for me because I had very high ambitions about what I was trying to do. And for every, I might shoot 50 sheets of film and get one picture that I liked. So one day I was working on the light box with my negatives, and I saw these two negatives that were happened to be placed on top of each other. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. They really line up beautifully. So I printed it, and I made this print. And what you're looking at is a kind of a nighttime view of, oops, what happened? Oops, can you go back? A nighttime view under the municipal building. So you see the Gustavino tiles up here. And that's actually me kind of standing next to the one of the columns. And then a kind of late afternoon shot. So it's both nighttime and daytime. And this process of layering negatives to achieve a kind of complexity really appealed to me, and it was a way of working that I pursued for many years. And so I ended up calling this picture Native Doric. And so these montages, these are the first work that I ended up showing in New York. My first solo show, I think it was 29, it was in 1986. And I showed a series of these montages. So in some cases, I started to reorganize my negatives. So for instance, this is a church in New Orleans with a factory from Buffalo. And this picture is called Sanctuary. And sometimes two not very good pictures made one really great picture. So it was sort of like taking 1 + 1 and getting Z. And it was that kind of interlay. And also because I was dealing with sheets of film, I didn't really know what the colors were going to be. It was like a merging of the different dyes. But I was always after sort of merging daylight with artificial light. And then sometimes I would actually combine a black and white negative with a color negative and get these kind of unusual effects of tonalities. So this is a train station and then a housing development in the south. So So as I was saying, I did this kind of layered montage negatives for about 7 years. And I painted and I Xeroxed and I scratched and I chemically altered negatives. I really got very deeply into it. And then I kind of reached a dead end. I just felt like it's not really working anymore for me. I'm kind of obscuring what I'm really after. So I went back to making straight pictures, but those straight pictures were informed by that process of building in layers and kind of having a very complexity of space. So I went back and I started photographing Times Square, and this was at the time, again, places in transition. This is the late 90s through the early 2000s when Times Square was being kind of Disneyfied. And for instance, this Howard Johnson's was sort of the last kind of old bit of New York in Times Square itself. And then people say, well, what time did you take the picture? And, you know, it's there, the time. It's, you know, all the information that you want to know is there. And in fact, if you know Broadway, you can actually date this picture because this show was open or this was about. So I love the fact that Times Square is a kind of instant history, that it's all embodied there. And I began to photograph all this closed theaters in Times Square. So for instance, this is the front row of the Selwyn Theater, and these amazing red seats. Like every red seat was a little bit of a different shade of red, and then they'd been painted red and fixed with red tape. It was just and you know, you can just imagine this front row on a Saturday night. And also these theaters, they had started out as legitimate theaters, then been vaudeville, and then first run and second run, Kung Fu and Triple X. They'd had these kind of, this whole lifetime, these chapters. And I was trying to capture in my photographs this kind of multi-chaptered life that these spaces had had. So for instance, this is the Empire Theater. This is, I think, about 1996. And then within 5 years, this is what it had turned into. And so you go from, you know, these beautiful layered, it was like reading a novel, those theaters, to this kind of junk food of architecture, where it's all just, you know, just buildings with signs on them. So again, and so I am interested in history, and it's always been one of my great loves, and how architecture embodies history and how it tells the story. So, but one project has always led to another. So the New York pictures, the theater pictures, and then someone said to me, oh, you should go to Cuba because they have some great theaters in Cuba. And so I ended up going to Havana in 1998. And this is just one of many of the theaters I photographed there. This is called the Campo Amor, which means the Field of Love. And this had been a light opera house. Placido Domingo's father had sung on the stage. I believe Garcia Lorca read from this stage. And so you have this tremendous ruin with these like bicycle taxis as the final spectators to this drama. And then I realized, well, it wasn't just the theaters in Cuba. I mean, it was the whole country and the whole, you know, the people and the places and the interiors. These are some sugarcane cutters. This picture is called Los Cañeros. And they were taking a break from probably one of the toughest jobs in the world. And they didn't mind to pose. I gave them some melted Snickers bars. That's all I had. And just kind of epic, you know, this reminds me kind of Courbet's Stonebreakers. And this is a lovely interior. Again, you can see color's also one of my main preoccupations. I've been printing color for decades. I started out as a color photographer, and I use color to create a kind of emotional, almost a kind of seduction, like it just pulls you in. So this yellow against this blue. And so in fact, this is actually interior of a building designed, it's actually in 1939, designed by an architect for himself, and it shows the transition between Art Deco and Art Moderne. And it also has this kind of Escher-esque spacing to it. And here is another good example of the kind of layering. So this is a bridge that connects Havana to the beaches at Veradero. And it's called Via Blanca, this road. And this is the highest bridge, through a highway bridge in Cuba. It was finished in 1960, right after Fidel came into power. And so, I'd always seen pictures of the highway cutting through the jungle, as a kind of very futuristic. I remember from the World's Fair in, I think, '64, the GM Pavilion had this like very futuristic. And so, and yet there's this one lone car, like a 1950s car, on this highway that's supposed to be this kind of futuristic thing, and the picture is taken in 2012. So it's a very confusing kind of what time are we actually in. So when I was in Cuba, I had some very close friends, and they said, "Oh, you should go to Russia because everything is so big in Russia. You would love it." And so I ended up getting a commission from a magazine to photograph in St. Petersburg. And then I loved it, and I made some great friends there, as I always do. I go, I experience, I make friends, and I go back and back and back, and these things take years and years to kind of evolve. But this is Palace Square in St. Petersburg. This is called the General Staff's Arch, and that's Alexander's column in the background. The angel has the face of the Tsar Nicholas II, and in the very background is Catherine's winter palace, also called the Hermitage. And this is the scene of the 1905 Bloody Sunday, and then also the Bolshevik, whatever you want to call it, coup in 1917. So one of the most beautiful public spaces in Russia, but also the scene of violence as well. This is in an island in the White Sea called Solovki. Now, this was built, this Kremlin complex housed what were called the Old Believers. These were the super religious, very strict, very orthodox monks who were kind of defending this northern part of territory against Sweden. And so it's considered one of the most spiritual places in Russia, but it's also the place where I think Nicholas I or II set up the first gulag. And so this picture is kind of a reflection of this mixed culture of Russia, which is intensely spiritual, but also tends to a kind of violence and extreme, the military and, kind of inhumanity. So the picture, in my mind, sort of shows this kind of duality of the Russian mentality. This is a model in the Russian Art Academy in St. Petersburg. You have to imagine that I'm standing there, but right next to me are all these painting students. And so this is a setup by the art teacher, which is almost kind of has this like Malevich-like construction. And then this woman who's been posing like that for decades, I assume, with the flamenco dress and the red hairband, and again, sort of just expressing the kind of all the contradictions and complexities of Russia itself. And this is a scene on the third floor of the Hermitage. You can imagine this was probably the maid's headquarters, the servants' part of the Catherine's palace, housing some of the most beautiful works of modern art. And again, flat, and then versus this kind of deep recession. Now, this was on a Monday, so the museum was closed, but normally there would be a bunch of babushkas sitting all on the line, kind of observing people. But this is a strategy that you'll see me use again and again, where I'm creating kind of flat space and then also puncturing that space and leading you deep into the picture. So I had been doing a lot of this foreign travel. I also been to China and Vietnam and so forth. But at some point, I realized that I didn't really know what I was doing. I spent a month in China, and I came back and I looked at all these negatives, and I didn't like any of them. I really didn't understand what I was looking at. And so I realized that, I need to come back to the United States. I really need to come back to my own country and play on my own home field and deal with what's going on in this country. And so the first big project was in Detroit. It's probably my best known work. It's from a book called Detroit Disassembled. And this, what looks like a sort of rice paddies in this, is actually Henry Ford's executive office suite when he was building the Model T Ford. So this is in a place called Highland Park, Michigan. Highland Park went bankrupt. This complex, which had been owned by Ford, was sold, and then but this building literally had not been entered for almost 60 years. And the way I got in was I met the owner. Excuse me. I met the owner, and we asked him. I was with some friends. I'm always kind of with a kind of small group that I'm working with, and we asked him, could we go into that building, that small little administration building? And he said, no, it's really dangerous. You can't go in. And so we went back to the other building another time, asked him again. He said, no, absolutely not. You can't go in. It's super dangerous. It's going to collapse. And so just by chance, we stopped by a third time. I don't know what we were doing. And he wasn't there. But the secretary was there, and so we asked her, and she goes, sure, I got the keys. We'll let you in. No problem. And even the handyman came along with us. And that's how I got this picture, because no one had ever been in, And it's, you can see, so these are, I guess, steel walls, all early office partitions that had rusted. And then this was the original wool carpet that over the years decayed and just turned into this incredible carpet moss. And so really what this represents to me is this kind of post-industrial toxic landscape, Like, you don't really want to walk on that, but it's very seductive at the same time. And this is very emblematic of Detroit. Detroit, this is in the Rouge plant out in Dearborn. That was, at one time, there were 100,000 people working at the River Rouge plant. On the day I was there, this was in 2008, maybe I saw like a dozen security guards. I mean, there was nobody there. And this part, which had been part of the steelmaking operation, which was later sold to the Russians, of all people, like this was just some building in the back, and they said, oh, nobody's been in there in 30 years. Is incredible how big and so the deindustrialization of America was so emblematic, and again in these years, 2008, 2009, 2010, Detroit had really hit rock bottom. And people ask me, oh, is this Photoshop? But no, in fact, this was in a high school called Cass Tech, very famous high school. Diana Ross went there, Ray Johnson. I mean, the people who went to this is a very famous art school in downtown Detroit. The building they built a new high school across the street, and they just left everything. They left the computers, the desks, everything. And people broke in and set fires and vandals and all this stuff. And so this was in a physics classroom, and somebody had set a fire, and the fire literally melted the face of time. And the picture is called National Time. You can see this is a very standard kind of school clock. And of course, it's very reminiscent of Salvador Dali's, now I'm forgetting the name, memoirs? Persistence of Memory. Thank you. God, I'm getting old. And this is another good example of what Detroit, this kind of topsy-turvy, upside-down world of Detroit. So this was a building which has been renovated beautifully, for instance, and that's a whole other story. But at the time, this was a building next to the train station that had been connected to this train station via a tunnel and was sort of the post office, and then later the school system took it over. So it became the book depository. And they had school books and papers and art supplies and everything in this building. And again, the building was abandoned, vandals came, burned things, broke all the windows, there was rain, there was snow. And so over time, out of all these decayed books, this beautiful grove of birch trees evolved. So in Detroit, you're not having books made from trees, you're having trees made from books. And that was Detroit in a nutshell. So after I had been working, before I went to Detroit, I had some friends out in western Nebraska. Nebraska has a little panhandle in the northwest corner, which has, it's called the Sand Hills. And the Sand Hills, when it was first kind of discovered, was called the Great American Desert because it was just rolling sand. But over time, it grassed over, became great cattle country after the Homestead Act, and the people came out there, set up a sod house, put up a fence, had some chickens, had a windmill, planted a tree. Now, trees really don't last out there unless they're fenced because something's going to come along and eat them. So this was near a friend of mine's property, and it's this beautiful old cedar tree, must have been 100 years old, and it's sort of died and come back to life. But it's the only thing that's left of this, what had been a homestead. So it's called Homesteader's Tree, and it's a kind of testament to this kind of persistence of spirit. But I really wanted to kind of capture the essence of this, I hope I'm not talking to him, the kind of immense space out there and this rolling hills and this feeling that I got where I was both in awe of this almost infinite space, and at the same time, you felt really small, really vulnerable. And I wanted to somehow capture that. And so what I ended up doing, I went to somebody's birthday party. Again, this project took 10 years for me to finish. I went to a birthday party, and I met a pilot, and he was a crop duster, and he loved photography. And so we ended up working together, and I mounted a camera to the strut of his Cessna, and then we flew thousands and thousands of miles. So this picture is taken from a moving airplane, and it shows a small homestead built by a Swiss guy in the 1880s, and then later added onto, used for bootlegging in the 1930s, and then abandoned, probably in the end of the Great Depression. This is a wind charger, so this would have had a little propeller that charged batteries here. I love the yellow porch. The picture's called the yellow porch. So it's almost like, the woman of the house said, like, oh, I'm going to cheer things up. I'm going to paint the porch yellow. You can see the bricks on the roof. They've actually collapsed. The chimney's fallen down. That's the only real bit of color. Sort of late. It's probably shot in March or something. And, that's what the colors are like in late winter in the sandhills of Nebraska. This is a cattle auction, also in Nebraska. Relating to that first picture I showed you, with long exposure using film. So what's happening here is that, most of these people have come to sell their cattle. There's a few buyers. And it's wintertime, so they're not really moving too much. And so about 50 head of cattle will come in, and they spin around in a kind of cyclone. And so, again, a long exposure and those cattle turned into this amazing kind of vortex. And I was super lucky that there was one cow that had a white spot on its head. And so that kind of created the center of that. And this man was a sheep farmer. He'd been known to keep a shotgun behind the door and kept all the neighbors away. But when I met him, he was pretty much blind. And he'd obviously, you can see from the decor of the house that, there had been better times for him, but there was something about something about him. I don't know. It's hard to express. I can express it in the photograph, but just the kind of the times that he had seen, because it's hard living out there. I mean, it's a very tough place to survive in. And again, speaking about architecture, I really love the way buildings express the time that they were built and their age. So this it looks like it's made of stone, but this is actually pressed concrete. This is a mail order house from Sears that was put together. And what they've done is they've taken the sand from the ground and created concrete blocks and made them on the site and made this big old house. And this is a ranching family. They don't really live in this house anymore, but they call it the big house. And that's two brothers and a sister and a cousin. And I loved these houses, and I found this one just out in the middle of nowhere. And for me, this is kind of the ultimate expression of ambition. You can't really read it, but this says Murray 1910 on this lintel here. And, rancher who made some money, ordered a house from Sears. It came in a month later, 3 boxcars. He went out there, built that house by himself, and then he went bankrupt a few years later. And now just cows kind of mill around this place. When this picture was shown in New York, an art critic said it was like a combination of Andrew Wyeth and Salvador Dali. So it does have a little kind of. So after I finished that project in Nebraska and South Dakota, I started working in the South where I have some family roots. This is a picture from Augusta. Augusta is a very segregated city, so this is on the African-American side of town. This is a woman who'd taken care of her neighbor's house even after he died. And this is actually in Selma, Alabama. This was a social club that was originally built by the Jewish community in Selma. It's called the Harmony Club. And Jews, although they did business with the locals, the Protestant, the WASPs of Selma, they weren't allowed to join the country club, so they built their own club. And this had originally been the men's smoking room, and then later was taken over by a bunch of artists from Atlanta and kind of left as a kind of hangout. So again, so much, these places have seen so much history and so many chapters. This is downtown Camden. Interesting enough, we were talking about, Ben was talking about drones. So this is shot with a drone, believe it or not. And one of the things I like to do with a drone is fly them very low to get kind of that unusual perspective where you don't quite know how it's done. And lastly, this is my most recent project. After living in the city for many decades, I moved up to the Hudson Valley. And this picture was shot a few years ago. So I'm kind of riffing on the Hudson River, the Hudson River School, which, as you may or may not know, was the kind of first artistic movement in America. Frederick Church and many other artists painted the valley and kind of extolled the beauty, but also were concerned about the disappearance because of the industrialization. And what's interesting about this is that, in fact, this is all a sort of second growth. If you see here, there's bricks on the beach here and bits of piers and even in this part. So this had been a whole center of brick making, and there were no trees. So what looks like a very pastoral setting is, in fact, a sort of regrowth, a sort of renatured scene. And then instead of having the painter or the draftsman, I have a photographer here. So to show that it's not 1856, but something much more recent. And these are just a few other pictures. There's a lot of legends and myths and hauntings of the Hudson Valley, and so I'm working on a book about kind of that aspect of the valley, and it's taking that romantic tradition but trying to update it in certain ways. This picture is called Jill's Keep, and again, getting back to the very first image, again, this is a place I had seen. I loved this grove of black walnut trees. It was an October morning, foggy. I got up early. I found this perfect spot. And then all of a sudden, this flock of sheep came over the hill. And I guess, just have to thank the photo gods for being so lucky for that. And again, sometimes things happen, and you just, this is almost complete darkness with a heavy wind, and I just opened the shutter and did a long exposure, and this tree just turned into like cotton candy. So anyway, that's my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right now, we're actually going to have a Q&A, so hold tight while we get some chairs for them. All right, you two. All righty. So, any questions? Oh, fantastic.
Hi. Andrew, your commitment to interpreting and recording the passage of time in your work is very impressive and moving. And you used some words that really resonated with me. Persistence of spirit. That's what you said.
What did I say?
Persistence of spirit.
Persistence of spirit. Yeah.
You were describing the tree that was the only remaining artifact.
Homesteader's tree.
Exactly. And I'm wondering where you find your own persistence of spirit in your work when you spend years and decades working on these projects and recording the passage of time. And I would love to extend this question to Dan as well. I feel like both of you really represented those words in your work.
I'm going to give a brief answer. When I started out photographing, I went around with a backpack. I carried all my stuff. I was this very solo kind of adventurer artist. And then at a certain point, during the montage, I started making some short films, and I got involved with filmmaking, and I learned how to collaborate with other artists and other people. And so ever since then, even starting with the Times Square project, definitely into Cuba, Russia, so forth and so on, I've worked with a kind of team. Like, I always try to collaborate and it's those working together with other people that really helps me persist. Because if I'm by myself, I get bored, I get frustrated, I get hungry, I get, I want to go home, and so I feel like working together with other people has really allowed me to pursue my vision.
Yeah. I think that my persistence, especially relating to when I was really struggling, I don't really know what gets me up and has me work a full-time job, and then I sometimes tell people I have at least 4 full-time jobs. Why do I keep doing that? I don't know. I feel like every year I get older, I feel like I need to do more. So every day I want to get up and I want to be able to do what I want to do. So Betsy is really structured, and she has lists and things like that, and that works great for her. But I want to get up, I want to walk outside, and I want to see something, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. So I think that's what really keeps me going. I'm getting older. I want to do more. I want to have, I don't want to do less harm. I want to do more good, and that really keeps me going.
Excellent. Any more questions?
I have a question about color manipulation. Do you do color manipulation in your photography? What do you do after you take the photo?
Okay, good question, and it comes up a lot because I'm very interested in color, obviously. And let's say the old days of color.
The Escher one, particularly that Escher, whatever that one was in Cuba.
One second.
Switch it up. Is that better?
Yeah.
Battery might have died. Is that better? So the Escher one. So that's shot on film. So those colors, those are actually the real colors. The blue, believe it or not, the blue. No, because the blue, because the house had a like a sun porch with blue glass. So that blue, and so if you look at the picture carefully, you see the yellow. So one thing about in Cuba, in the architecture, is that because the sunlight's so strong, there's a lot of use of colored glass to kind of mitigate the brightness of the light in the interiors. So anyway, there was that yellow glass, the blue from the sun porch, and then if you look up the stairs, you can see there is what I would say normal daylight, and if you look on the stairs, there's a mixing where it goes from normal to so it kind of goes to gray to purple to blue to yellow, and that's all just happened in the film. So.
Are there any particular colors that you're attracted to? Any that you kind of stray away from? Any hidden emotions or things like that that you feel are invoked by said colors?
Of course, the compliments. I mean, if you look at the picture of Times Square, the Howard Johnsons, there's that orange and green, and in the background you see yellow and blue. And then in the Escher picture, yellow and blue again. And there's lots of examples where I'm using the complement. But my main idea is that there should be an overall tone, like it's warm or it's cool, and then there's a contrast to that. And then against all that, there are sub-contrasts. So there's like a main contrast and then sub-contrasts, and then they all kind of work together. So, I'm using complementary colors, but I like that kind of theme, sub-theme, kind of counterpoints kind of running through. Do you want color? Is color for you?
Yeah, I can just answer that super quick. There's not many colors that you can get with Willow. There are and there aren't. There's just like hues of green, a lot of brown. So, and typically when I'm working with color, I'm just working with whatever I have available, because at this point I have a limited supply.
So if you had green, could you add a little red?
There is kind of reddish available. They become more muted. So they're really beautiful and vibrant when you harvest them, and then when they dry down, they get more muted, and then when you soak them again, they change again, and when they dry again, they change again. So it's really kind of going from wow to
I had. Sorry, I had one more lightweight question for you, Dan. How many types of willow do you grow, or do you know? Have you lost track?
yeah, about 110.
Holy.
Yeah, I love varieties.
So I saw so many colors in your basket during the hard times when you were reaching out to other willow growers. That basket looked so colorful, but you just told us what happens after
Yeah,
all this.
they do. They get muted over time. And it's really just like you have greens, and all the greens kind of look the same. So it's not like you get this really dark green and a really light green. It's all just kind of like, this is the basketry green you get, you know. But I do play with color when I can, when I have them available. And surprisingly, the really beautiful colors are the hardest to grow. They're the ones that the rabbits like the most.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Both of you are facilitators, educators, one for a really long time and one reluctantly. I don't have this fully formed yet, but we don't have all night. So this question isn't fully formed, and maybe it will throughout the week that we still have each other. But there's something. You didn't talk about your teaching practice, Andrew, but we talked about it in the car, in the shuttle.
We did talk, yeah, a little.
Not like, you didn't like go, you were talking about the work, but like you've been facilitating photo classes at SVA for like 200 years or something.
Yeah, and a lot of other places as well.
Yeah. So there's something here that's really beautiful about the way you both, this persistence of spirit, that shows up in both of your practices, and there's something really beautiful about expanding possibilities for others. So something under the umbrella or the basket, canopy, of advocacy. I'm sorry that this isn't fully formed, but when you took us to the farm and you showed us how you brought those students out there to have an experience that is extremely rare, I think about art school that way, that there's this like limited time to have this, what turns out in this world to be an extremely rare opportunity to work with other people who take this seriously and who like can show you stuff that has happened, show you how to do stuff. So I was wondering if you two could like, I don't know, talk about that a little bit, like what that means for you to have these robust practices of your own and how that informs how you make space for other people to learn and to grow and expand possibility, like to not be limited in a world that limits so much.
So I'm the beneficiary of some amazing teachers. Emmett Gowan, Peter Bennell, Frederick Sommer, Joel Meyerowitz, who I don't like as personally, but interesting to meet him. Jim Dow, I mean, really a lot of people over. And so I feel like it's my obligation to give back, honestly, as an artist, for all that I was given, to get, like, it's an absolute obligation to give back. And, sometimes I'm in awe of like, oh, I'll never be as great a teacher as the people I had, but also, they're part of a legacy. Like Emmett Gowan's teacher was Harry Callahan, So it's Harry Callahan, Emmett Gowan, me. Now I'm giving that to the next generation. So that's 4 generations of photography right there. And then also the people I work with and my teams, they benefit a lot. My assistants, I mean, they get like a medieval apprenticeship when they spend, sometimes they work for me for years and stuff. So I just feel that that's a part of my mission as an artist, is to give back.
Yeah, because I haven't been doing this so long, that's a big question. That's something that I think about a lot. I'm trying to do for students who are willing to be vulnerable and come to a class, I'm trying to give to them what I wasn't willing to go and do myself. And try to, because I'm so new to it, I'm still able to get back to that beginner's mind. And I feel like I'm able to work with students and really make them feel okay where I would not have been okay. And I really feel like I need to be an ambassador for this craft because there's not many people doing it. People are really getting excited about it, but not many people do it. And it's surprising how many people don't even know about it whenever we're out there in the world showing people what we're doing. And I think it's so beautiful because it's so sustainable. I'm making my own material, which is something that I really, really loved about basketry because I thought, I don't want to buy things. I want to make things to make things. And I'm in this partnership with Willow, and it's such a beautiful partnership, and I really want to share that with people who have the ability to grow it themselves and really form this connection with it.
Thank you both very much. And thank everyone for all the questions. So